This war lasted 116 years. 2 to 3 million people died in this conflict. It had 2 temporary states of peace, had 10 leaders that fought in this war. This, of course, was the 100 Years' War, whereas EU4 players know it as the annoying war that pops up between England and France. The root causes of this war was when King Charles IV of France died with no sons or brothers, and his closest male heir was Edward III of England, so he rightfully claimed the throne to be his. So, when the French nobles were like, "No, we need a French native as our king, not some tea-loving English fool," they ended up choosing Charles IV's cousin, Philip, Count of Valois, to rule France. Edward peacefully protested, but it was to no avail. But then, in this so-called Great Council of Paris, which may have not been so great considering it started a 116-year-long war that isn't even called something cool or correctly named. They were like, let's name it a name because they rounded it down and they weren't specific. But anyways, the people in the council were like, let's make sure Gascony, a part of England, becomes a part of the French nation led by Philip VI. And since Edward III was, living there, he was kind of offended, so he renewed his claim on the throne. And the French fries, which French fries aren't even French, were like, no way, Jose. So, when Eddie the third was stubborn and kept the claim renewed, like your subscription to this channel should be. So then the French flew declared war, even though they took so much from the tea-loving English to take Gascony for their own, and probably some more food. And the war of making me mad began. The 100 Years' War split up into multiple parts by historians. The beginning of the war was known as the Edwardian Phase. It went from 1337 to 1360. The reason it's called the Edwardian Phase is that it has to do with King Edward III and King Edward III's son. King Edward III and his son were English. King Edward III's son had a fancy nickname. It was Edward, the Black Prince. But sadly, he did not get to live with the nickname. Very much rip. Because he got the nickname after he died. Rip! Again! He got the nickname due to the black armor he wore. Anyways, back to the Edwardian Phase. So in the Edwardian Phase, King Edward III and the Black Prince saw a huge success when the French King John II was taken prisoner. I'm sure that King Edward III and the Black Prince were very, very happy. This would definitely be useful to the English in the 100 Years' War. But I guess nothing else. Sad. The first peace lasted 9 years between England and France, with a treaty that gave England control of Gascony along with other lands, along with a ransom being set on John III to £3 million. But then John II somehow went down to France to raise funds to pay his ransom, and then his son Louis of Anjou escaped. And because he escaped honorably, John II returned to his captivity in London and died in 1364. At this point, the English had never officially but still supported an attempt for Navarre's takeover of France. Navarre is somewhere near Gascony. Just 3 days before Charles V took power, the Navarres suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Coquerel. The next phase of the war is known as the part we are doing it, so get used to it. Ugh! So, in Castile, which at the time was an Iberian kingdom, there was a civil war. No, not Captain America versus Iron Man, but Peter, I guess. Where a very original place. Castile and Henry of Trastamara. I hope I pronounced that wrong. Peter of the very original place was supported by the English, and Henry of, I hope I pronounced that place wrong, was supported by the
Mimes were made in ancient Greece.
Mimes are from ancient Greece. Why do the French decide that everything is theirs and they take all the credit but did negative 42% of the work? This is offensive. So what are we talking about? I forgot. Sorry. Yes. How of Henry of how to pronounce this place was supported by the French. But later in time, because I don't want to talk about Spanish peeps anymore in the video about 116 Years' War, or more commonly known as the 100 Years' War. So, when Edward III made attacks by deaths made in the Castilian campaign, Charles V met with Gascon lords, and they spilled the beans about how they did not want to pay this time tax since the Castilians failed to repay their debts. So, when Charlie V asked Eddie III to meet in high courts of Paris to settle the matter, and Edward III replied that we would come with 60,000 troops, and guess what? War broke out! Yeah! So the Duke of Brittany, no, not somebody you know, a part of modern-day France, led a campaign to help the defeat of the French. And in the start, it was a military success. But then the French started to surround the English forces, and it was met with a crushing defeat and deemed a military failure. But by the end of the phase, both nations had met turmoil along with their successes and defeats, and they entered into the temporary second peace. You see, before the second peace was a war, but not too much happened. Only like a civil war in Burgundy. Nothing to worry about. France. Totally not. In the third phase of the war, started by Henry V of England, who took the opportunity of a mentally ill king in Charles VI of France, and the civil war in Burgundy to expand his nation's French holdings, and with great victories at Agincourt in 1415 and Verneuil in 1424, the English were looking like they were going to win and defeat those French food thieves. But when there was a nice young lady named Joan of Arc who's like, what? How is she young if she's from Noah's Ark? Weird. Well, she boosted the French morale and ended up helping to end the war with her work at the Siege of Orleans and other battles. Were God's work? She stated that she's receiving missions from God to drive the English from France, which she was really good at. But eventually the war ended and the French won. A large factor at the end of the war was that the English didn't have the desire to continue the war, so they, if you don't have a desire to do something, you end it. It still leaves a more civil rivalry between the two nations, but by now, I don't think they're planning to continue this war. They seem pretty decent now, so sadly, no sequel soon. Rip, Kevin. Well, all good things must come to an end, and apparently bad things, because this video is ending. Thanks for watching this video. Goodbye. Sincerely, Beetlejuice!